Assalamu alaikum students, here is Usama Tahir and you're watching Learn English with Usama Tahir. How are you my students? Today I'm going to teach you three interesting phenomena, which is the first one is social barrier, second is vernacular languages, and the third one is sounds in the vernacular language. So without wasting time, let's talk about social barriers. Students, we have been discussing a lot about that there are a lot of dialects and the varieties in the languages. So all of these varieties are different in the way we rank them. Some are considered to be the varieties associated with the upper class and higher status people, and some are considered to be the languages of the working class and the lower status group members. So students, there is a social distance between different varieties. There is barrier. What is that barrier? That upper class people and the groups who are in power, they consider the languages of dominated groups to be inferior, lower prestigious, or something like that. So we have an example here is African American English. In America, it is considered to be a lower language, a variety that is spoken by the groups who were dominated for a large period of time. So they considered it, other people, the upper group members, they considered it as the bad language, as the rough language. So we overall consider this phenomena as the social barrier, that they are discriminated. There is a barrier between the dialects, between the lower prestigious varieties and the higher prestigious varieties, like the general American, like the British upper class varieties are considered to be the better varieties than the varieties that are spoken like, for example, Cockney English, working class, the language of the working class Londoners. So that's how we define the social barriers, that in language they create barriers, they create discriminations. So next we need to talk about vernacular language. So students, as we have already told you about the African American language, that it is considered as the language of the lower prestige, the language of the lower status group. So we call it African American English, that is spoken by most of the Africans and the other groups as well of the New York or somewhere as well. So the vernacular, this term has been used since Middle Ages, and it means the language that is spoken by the ordinary people or the lower prestige groups. Okay, and so that's why we call it African American Vernacular English as well, because African American English is also the vernacular language, the language of the ordinary people or the language that is spoken by the lower status group members. So this is what we call the vernacular English, and we have other Chicano English and Latino English, as you can see here. So this is spoken by the Hispanic American community members. So this is what we call vernacular English, the English or the vernacular language, the language that is, you can say, the spoken by the ordinary people or the working class, and is not given the proper prestige, and it also has the covert prestige and not the overt prestige. It is not considered to be the correct form by the larger audience, but the inner group members considered it to use for their mutual solidarity and all. So next we have the vernacular language sounds. Students, vernacular languages has its own grammar, has its own structure as well as sounds. For example, in vernacular English, African American vernacular English, we see some subtle differences in their language. The very first is they reduce the consonant cluster. Like, consonant cluster means the group of consonants at the end of the word. The end consonant clusters will be reduced. How will they be reduced? For example, left, f and ta at the end. So it will be reduced by left. Instead of saying left, they will say left. And hand, na and da at the end of the hand. So they will pronounce it hand. So similarly, this phenomena creates problem in understanding the past tense sentences. For example, We use ed in English for the past tense mostly, so they will say pass instead of past. So it creates an ambiguity. So similarly, they don't use possessive s. For example, John's girlfriend, they won't say like that, they will say John girlfriend. And they also don't use third person singular like she loves him, they will say she love him. Similarly, they don't care about the plural forms and they will use the singular. For example, two boy, two guy, one of my friend. So what are the difference in their sounds? They speak th and da into t and da. For in the th and da into t and da. Th, think, they say think. Okay, the they say the. This they say dis. So this is how they change the pronunciation and the sound of English. So that's how there are lots of varieties, and we just see them, you know, in a critical way, and to understand the subtle differences in them. So some of the differences are so confusing, even I get confused of them, that how to pronounce them, how to say them. Like the thada, I got myself confused in it. So that's how we see the language, that's how we see the variety. So if you have any question, you can, you know, ask in the comment section. Thank you, God bless you, Allah Hafiz.